Hi and welcome. This is Mario Herger from the San Francisco Bay Area. If you look at the second quarter results of the German automotive industry, you see huge profit losses. Volkswagen, for example, saw their profit dropping by 29%, Porsche even by 91%, even Mercedes 68%, and BMW 32% drop in profit year over year. I want to talk about one of the reasons why this happened, and I have to go and to China with you. And the book that I'm referring to is China in Apple. China in Apple, the capture of the world's greatest company. The book is by Patrick McGee. He writes for the Financial Times. He lives in the San Francisco Bay Area, has been there since 2019. Before that, he was in Germany reporting, amongst others, about the German automotive industry. And he undug a lot of information that has not been known like this until now. He interviewed over 200 people, and he's reporting mainly about how Apple outsourced its supply chain to China. Well, that was nothing new, but the way they did it is new. It is not just an outsourcing where I have a supplier over there and tell them what to do. Apple also owns all the machinery. This is the first point. So all the machinery that the employees or suppliers are working at is owned by Apple. Apple then also sends engineers from Cupertino over to China and trains the engineers of these supply companies. Now, how many engineers do you think Apple has trained over the years in China? Turns out that in the past 20 years, Apple has trained over 5 million engineers. 5 million engineers. That's not the employees of all these 1,500 suppliers that they have, but all these engineers, many of them went into other industries. Now, the best thing is, or one of the most interesting things is that Apple told the suppliers not to have more than 50% of revenue coming from Apple. Why? Well, if Apple is going to change something in the next generation of an iPhone and leaving out a certain piece that a certain supplier was responsible for, then it just go belly up and bankrupt. And that gives bad press. And so they wanted to make sure that those companies have other companies that they're manufacturing for. So that means also they're working not only for Apple, but also for Huawei and LG and other companies that are building smartphones. But that's not only restricted to smartphones industry. Many of them also, of course, are now working in the automotive industry, meaning that the electronics and the software that today is in the modern Chinese cars comes from those engineers trained by Apple. That's why they are so good. The interesting thing is that the suppliers, most of them are not really making a profit with Apple. Apple is putting down the prices a lot, negotiating them. But those suppliers are hugely interested to learn from Apple, to be trained by Apple. The profit that they're making is coming then from all the other suppliers. This way, Patrick figured out that alone in 2015, Apple invested $55 billion in China and has done that year over year over year, probably also increasing those investments over the years. So we can safely assume that Apple has invested over $500 billion in the last 10 years in China. That makes investments that we're hearing from the United States, like the Stargate project, which is supposed to be $500 billion in the next 5 years, or Germany, where over 60 companies now mentioned committed to investing over $600 billion into new technologies in Germany. This looks like money for the stamps mail that you're sending out. If just one company, Apple, is investing so much money into China. Now, this strength is also meaning that Apple has a huge vulnerability here, because if you're relying on China only, and if there is coming trade sanctions or let's hope not, a war when China is trying to conquer Taiwan or gets in a military conflict with the United States, then Apple is hugely exposed here. But it's not very easy to get into other countries, as Apple has seen. Building up a similar infrastructure in, for example, India or Vietnam may be almost impossible, and not something that you can do from one day to the other. So it's an interesting and fascinating read, this book, Apple in China, that Patrick McGee has written. I highly recommend this book. It's about 400-500 pages. I read it in 2 days. It was so fascinating, and I think it makes you much better understand the electronic industry, smartphone industry, and also things like the car industry today, and why traditional car makers are so much in trouble. And even Tesla is in trouble because they're not benefiting that much from Apple's investments in China. So that's all for me today. If you want to read more, I have a website called technophilosoph.com, and of course, car industry, the last driver's license holder.com. Also, I have some books, and please subscribe to my YouTube channel and comment on that. Let me know what you think. Hope to see you next time again. Bye.